Welcome to Nada Yada Island.
Next on Metro's Nada Yada Island podcast.
I almost fainted when the 4 new bombshells arrived. 4 free Samsung Galaxy A16 5G phones at Metro.
No way.
And finding out the 4th line is free? Oh, things got heated.
That's wild. Join Metro and get 4 free Samsung 5G phones. Only at Metro.
Plus tax. Bring 4 numbers and an ID and sign up for any Metro Flex plan. Not available currently at T-Mobile or been with Metro in the past 180 days.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hey, where you been? Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I am Stephen Means, that's Stefan, Krajisnik, and that's Andrew Gillis. This is your Thursday pod. On Friday, I'm also going to say it's the Thursday pod. I lie sometimes. Don't worry about that. That's Friday's problem. That's Friday listeners' problem. This is Thursday's listeners' problem. We have a reported coaching staff, at least on the offensive side of the ball, Stefan. Nothing is official yet. All this is just so Ohio State hasn't made this official, which essentially probably just means they're going through HR stuff. You know, the stuff we all go through when we get a new job and whatnot, and negotiating like final details and small details. But Ryan Day is still going to be the head coach. That's a true statement. Ryan Day is splitting up offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, which is essentially what Chip Kelly was last year. He's splitting those jobs up between 2 people. Brian Hartline, who was already a co-OC the last 2 years, is now a play-calling offensive coordinator. Billy Fessler, who spent the past year in an analyst role, is now the new quarterbacks coach. And Tyler Bowen, who spent the last 2 years at Virginia Tech. 1 year he was the quarterbacks coach, 1 year he was the tight ends coach. But his specialty is still offensive line, even though he's coached every offensive position but running back in his coaching career across multiple stops, Stefan. That's your coaching staff. So where do you want to start?
Let's start with Hartline. Let's start at the guy who's going to be calling the plays.
Okay.
The news that initially broke that Hartline was going to be promoted to coordinator, some of those initial reports didn't have clarity on if he was going to call plays or not. Adam Rittenberg, ESPN, came out a little bit after those initial reports and said that Hartline will call plays. So this is something I don't want to say we expected, because there were other names we were thinking Ryan Day was probably going to consider, but it kind of became pretty clear early this week that this is the route that Day was probably going to go. And it was kind of just a matter of fine-tuning some things. And I like the move a lot. Steven, you and I did a YouTube video where we talked about how much we like the move. And what I like even more than the decision is the speed in which Ryan Day went about this. It was a lot for him to give up play calling duties, even to a guy like Chip Kelly or to a guy like Bill O'Brien. And there was this question of how much can Ryan Day trust someone that's not literally his lifelong mentor, someone who he considers his football father? How trustworthy is he going to be? And him making this quick of a move shows me that Chip Kelly taught him something, and he saw what can happen when you're a head coach who just hands over the play calling duties. I think that's one part of it. I think another part of it is it's kind of felt like it started to build that at what point is Ryan Day going to finally give Brian Hartline this role? Because Andrew, you had said it either in a video or podcast earlier this week, the now or never aspect to it. I mean, I don't know how true that is, right? Like, if he had promoted Hartline next year, would Hartline be fine with it? Maybe. But if he had gone about it again, Ryan Day, that is, gone about it again this offseason, making an external hire and saying, hey, Hartline, I understand you've been a great position coach for us at receiver, but I still rather go get someone else at offensive coordinator. At some point, some school is going to call and say, hey, Hartline, here's the money and here's the title. And at some point, Hartline's going to say yes. And I think Ryan Day, this swiftly being like, okay, the moment Chip Kelly leaves, Ryan Hartline, you are the guy. We are wasting no time. Like, you are the guy. I trust you. It is your time. I think that says a lot about Brian Hartline. I think it says a lot about Ryan Day. And I think that was the proper way to do this. Don't drag it on. Don't, show that you have some doubts about Hartline. Like, don't waste time. Do the move that you think is the right move and do it efficiently. And I think that's what he did here with Hartline. And I think it sends a message to Hartline of, hey, I trust you. There are no questions about this. You are an elite receivers coach. You're an elite recruiter. And I trust you now to be the offensive play caller. I think Ryan Day pretty loudly showed how much he trusts Brian Hartline to make this move now.
So it's a trust thing. It's Andrew, it feels like we were headed in this direction for 2 years now, back when Ryan Day was thinking about giving up play calling in 2023 and kind of let Brian have a trial run at it during the spring in some of those scrimmages. And then Ryan was ready to give it up. But I do wonder how much of this is also, I don't know if Brian Hartline was the right person to give this up to a year ago. Because, one, it's the first time Ryan Day is doing this. But also, think about where Ryan Day was 12 months ago. Right now, he's on top of the world. And I'm going to get into that some on this podcast after we talk about some of these new hires. But that's not where Ryan Day was 12 months ago. Oh, let's go hire the hotshot guy who'd never done the job before. He needed to be sure about everything he was doing a year ago. Can't take chances when you are 3 Michigan losses deep, 3 years since your last Big Ten title, and you're coming off an embarrassing Cotton Bowl loss. And your quarterback just hopped in the portal. And your all-time great wide receiver is outed off to the NFL. And you don't have room anymore for error. And I'll get more into that in the second segment. But this does seem like the perfect time to do it. From a Brian Hartline standpoint of, you put it in his head 2 years ago that, hey, maybe this is something. Brian Hartline gets a trial run at it. He sees what it's like. He starts to get more responsibilities in terms of some of the game plan organization. His voice carries a little bit more weight in those offensive coaching staff meetings. And then you bring in a guy. First it was Bill O'Brien. Then it was Chip Kelly. But the point is, you bring in an older guy who's been around the block. And Brian Hartline gets to see it up close and personal. This is what it looks like to be a play calling OC in college football. Because who knows? Bill O'Brien was out the door 3 weeks after he got here. And Chip Kelly left 12 months after he got here. So maybe Bill O'Brien was on the same timeline of, I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time. And Chip Kelly got to have the good time. Bill O'Brien got to have even less of a good time because he was here for 2 weeks. I don't even know if he ever found a home in Columbus. So a year of gaining responsibility, a year of seeing what it looks like up close and personal. Now Brian Hartline is able to do this. So that's from a Brian Hartline perspective. I think, Andrew, from a Ryan Day perspective, you have to find out what he is. And I think you'd rather find out what he is in Columbus versus finding out what he is anywhere else, just in case he's just as good at this as he has been at literally every other facet of being an assistant coach in college football.
The word that I have been thinking of for the last couple of days, especially as we've talked about this, but maybe in the hours since this has come out, the word that I have been thinking of is guardrails, and that there are guardrails set up now that, like you said, Stephen, were not there a year ago. We're not there 18 months ago. We're not there a couple of years ago. They're new. Like, the pressure is now off to a varying degree. Like, of course, there's going to be a lot of people that are listening to this. Of course, there's going to be a lot of people in the fan base that are saying, but they still have to beat Michigan. They do, but there's also a national championship banner that they're going to hang on the first game of the season against Texas. So, like, I think that's okay. So you look at where this staff is at. You are not asking Hartline to come in here and fix anything. You are not asking Hartline to come in here and know everything and have the greatest, schemer like mentality of all time. You don't need that. You've got a quarterbacks coach. Like, you've got somebody that is going to handle that. And Ryan Day is obviously known for his quarterback development. You've got a running backs coach. You've got a tight ends coach. And the offensive line coach that you got, which we can talk about in a little bit, but the offensive line coach that you got is a former play caller who played on the offensive line and can really help Hartline out in a run game aspect, run game coordinator type of role, run game coordinator type of mentality where you're helping him along there. It's, you set things up, right? It's like the bumper lanes in bowling. It's like, hey, no, I don't think anybody's expecting Brian Hartline to come in here. I mean, maybe some people are, but I don't know if anybody's expecting Brian Hartline to come in here and from day one be the best offensive coordinator, be the best play caller in college football. I mean, you would think that there might be, all right, there's a game where he has to learn something. There's a game where he has to pick up some things that, it's just, it comes with experience, right? I guarantee you Chip Kelly, who has done this for a very, very long time offensively, I guarantee you there are some things that if you asked him and said, what did you learn about calling plays as an offensive coordinator? I guarantee you there are some things that he was going to say, I didn't learn this until I started calling plays, until I started having to game plan plays, until I started having to actually be the one doing this. So it's just, you look at this and say the health of the program right now is at a level where you feel comfortable doing this. And that's important to me. And I think that you're right. I think now is the time because you are set up in a manner where your head coach is feeling really good about where things are at. You've got all these other position groups that you now have kind of taken care of. And now you can just promote Hartline and say, let's see what you got, kid. And you're not asking him to overextend himself. You're not asking him to do something he's not ready for. You're not asking him to do something that he's never done before in terms of like, hey, now you got to coach tight ends or something like that. It's a role I think that Hartline is ready for and that Ryan Day has kind of set this program up to succeed with Hartline.
I don't want to say it was now or never, but the longer you put it off, the more chances you have that eventually somebody else, as you said, Stefan, is going to take him and do it for and find out for you. And what you don't want is you find out. Now, granted, this is Ohio State, and this is a team that's lost, 15 games in the past 15 years or something like that. So they would be fine. But it's just, Ryan Day likes this idea of homegrown guys. He hires from within a lot of the times. He's even said it before, and I think I said it on this pod. This idea of why do you have to leave to come back here and do what we think you can do anyway? Why not learn here? Why not develop here? It's part of you developed here. Like, I know it's a slogan and it can come off as funny sometimes, but yes, it starts with the players, but it's not just about the players. You're developing coaches. You're developing, Kayla Olson's developing people within her nutritionist staff who eventually are going to go off and be nutritionists somewhere else. Mick Marotti is developing strength and conditioning staff members who are going to go off and run their own rooms at some point. Mark Mantoni is developing people in the recruiting wing who are going to go off and be directors of recruiting somewhere else. Morgan Phillips just came here for a year and then left to go back to LSU where she's running the recruiting room there. There's people all over the country who were here at Ohio State developing in the recruiting wing, and now they're running recruiting rooms all over the place. Gene Smith, before he retired, he was developing other ADs who are all over the country right now, which is why when he retired, it was like, oh, which guy from the guy or girl from the Gene Smith AD tree is going to come be the AD at Ohio State? And that's not the route President Carter ended up going with, but that's kind of the point here. You're developing people, and part of that development is giving people opportunities. And there's nobody who has developed into a better assistant coach at Ohio State under Ryan Day than Brian Hartline. So at some point, you give him the opportunity. You've been spending 6 years developing him to potentially take over, especially if you're ready to do so. And maybe the same can be applied to Keenan Bailey, who was a GA here, right? The same can be applied to James Laurinaitis, who came here as a grad assistant. Now he's a linebackers coach. The same can be applied to Billy Fessler. What a trend. You like the segue? You guys like that? Billy Fessler, I know he had to leave, but he was here 2 or 3 years ago as a quarterback's GA. And then he went up to Akron to be the quarterback's coach. And then he went out with Chip Kelly to UCLA to be their quarterback's coach. So when Chip Kelly came to Columbus, guess who he brought with him? Billy Fessler. And I'm wondering, and I can't wait to talk to Billy, if he was willing to give up being an assistant coach and the money that comes with that to come be an analyst. Analysts don't make a lot of money. I'm going to be frank with you. They make less than what we make. They don't make a ton of money. But if you thought it was an investment in what might be available for you a year from now, 2 years from now, then it ended up being the right move for Billy Fessler. And it's also another chance for Ryan Day to prove the developed here theory he has of this guy incubated here as a GA, came back as an analyst. He's ready to do this, especially when on both the recruiting front and from Will Howard, you're hearing all these good things about what type of coach he is.
Well, just to chime in real quick, I think it was Stefan who said at the beginning of this, like, you don't want to open that possibility up to like see if Hartline can do this somewhere else. I think Stefan said that early. Like, that's 100% right. Like, you have the infrastructure. I think is kind of what's in place. Maybe that's a better word than guardrails, but like, you don't want to be. It wasn't like you had Chip Kelly for 7 years and Hartline was just blocked, right? Like, it would have been, you had opportunities to, put somebody into that role, that play calling role with Hartline, and you just didn't do it. And I think, like you said, I think when you kind of map out where this thing is at in terms of how it flows downward, I think right now it just makes all the sense in the world to say, let's give him a shot, because you don't want to invite that scenario of, some team comes in and, let's Godfather offer Hartline and let's make him, by far the highest paid coordinator in the sport. And all of a sudden, you've got an offer where it's, you have an offensive coordinator and some teams offering Hartline $4 million to be their coordinator. It's like, and you don't want to be put in that tough bind, and this avoids that.
Some might offer him $6 million.
The NFL, that's what I'm saying. The NFL just did it for Chip Kelly. So it's like, you don't want to invite that scenario.
There's an element to this too, Stephen, that, you kind of mentioned the developed here aspect of it. There's also, Ryan Day trusts the people that he develops. He also, Brian Hartline is a guy that, came in when Urban Meyer was a coach and stayed with Ryan Day. Tyler Bowen, even though he's never worked directly with Ryan Day, was hired by Urban Meyer to coach when Urban was with the Jaguars. Billy Fessler, he was a GA here, but he also is obviously very trusted by Chip Kelly and Joe Moorhead, who's another respected offensive mind in the game. Like, the people that he's hired are also really close to the people that Ryan Day is really close to, or at least have some connection to the people that Ryan Day is really close to. And I think that matters as well, right? Like, we talk about trust. Well, there's probably not many people in the football realm that Ryan Day trusts more than Urban Meyer and Chip Kelly when it comes to people who worked under them and things of that nature. So these hires all kind of make sense when you look into them a bit. And all these guys are pretty young, and it's a pretty young staff that Ryan Day is putting together. But these are guys that are also very experienced. We haven't talked about Bowen yet too much on this pod. Like, he's 35 years old. He's worked at Penn State. He's worked in the NFL with the Jaguars. He's been an offensive coordinator for 3 years now with Virginia Tech, one of them as a tight ends coach, the last 2 working with quarterbacks. Like, this is a young staff, but it's somewhat experienced, at least at the higher level. Billy Fessler's 29. He was an offensive coordinator at Akron, at least by title, and was about to be a quarterbacks coach for Chip Kelly at UCLA. Like, these guys are very young, but they're pretty experienced, and they're well respected by some older and wiser minds in the game.
Brandon Ennis is on Twitter calling Billy Fessler a mastermind. And Will Howard said he said about the role he played in all of this. Here's my question about Billy Fessler, and then we can move on to Tyler Bowen. So Ryan Day's CEO mode now, fully, but also it's a young first-year starting quarterback, no matter who wins the job. And it's either a young first-year starting quarterback who's in year 3 in the system, but outside of worst case scenario happened in the Cotton Bowl, he hasn't played a lot of football, or it's young, promising 5-star in his second year as a college football player who's thrown 12 passes in his career. Is Ryan Day going to be around the quarterbacks a little bit more often, Stefan, this year?
I imagine probably, and I imagine he'll probably have more of a hand throughout the regular season in terms of the offense as a whole and specifically the play calling that maybe he did with Chip Kelly.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure when the playoff rolls around, he'll be very heavily involved. I think he was pretty heavily involved, at least leading into the game, about play calling and an offensive game plan. Once the early signing period, all that stuff passed, when he could kind of focus more on the X's and O's. So yeah, I'm sure he'll be pretty involved. I mean, we saw him get involved with the defense after the Oregon game. Like, this allows him the option to bounce around and be where he's needed. If it gets midway through the season and, hey, Julian Sain's looking fine, the quarterback room is looking fine, but the corners are struggling a little bit, like, Day doesn't have to stay stuck in that quarterback's room. I think that's the nice part about this is when he's needed there, he can be very heavily involved, and maybe he'll have a voice throughout the year. But at the same time, if he's needed elsewhere, he's now got the time, the luxury to do that as well.
Yeah, but you get what I'm asking, because it is still his position, and you're right, he can hop around a little bit, but he's entrusting his room to a 29-year-old who, yes, he's been a quarterback's coach. So this is not Corey Dennis, Andrew, where it's like, huh? That's what you did? Corey? Really? He's got a little bit more of a resume. One, he played quarterback in the Big Ten. Yes, he only threw 2 passes at Penn State, but he was a Big Ten quarterback. 2, he has been a quarterback's coach before. 3, he has had the title offensive coordinator next to his name, even if he was not the play caller at Akron. He is essentially, at Akron in 2023, he was like Brian Hartline in terms of the responsibilities as a coordinator. So the resume is there for it to at least be, if he wasn't in the building already, he'd be like, okay, I see Ryan is probably tapping into something here. But still, this is a young quarterback whose first game is going to be against a top 10 opponent. I'm with you. If the defense looks like it's having issues after week 4, he's going to go in and talk to whoever the defensive coordinator is and he goes, what the heck is going on? And unlike Jim Knowles, at least reportedly, can't pop an attitude if the head coach does what he's supposed to be doing. And that's hop in your room and tell you to get your stuff together. That's his job as the head coach. You are facilitating and coordinating his vision. So whether you like it or not, that's his job as your boss. Just like it's your job as the coordinator to be the boss of the other assistant coaches. It's just how the hierarchy works here. I am just wondering if for the first month of the season, Day is just kind of, because he's not calling plays either. So it's not like he's got to be line stepping what every single position is doing right now. That's Brian Hartline's job to walk around to all the different position groups and to run the meeting and so forth. So I'm just wondering, Billy Fessler's got a bright future, but young quarterbacks coach, and a head coach who is a quarterback's coach by trade. I'm wondering if we ask Julian Sand or Lincoln Keenels by week 3, hey, how much you been hanging out with Ryan Day for the past 3 weeks? And they're just like, yeah, I'm in his office like 3 times a week, just going over stuff. Because that's what you do when you've got a young quarterback.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, think about the 2 scenarios that you got here. You got a defensive staff, which could theoretically just remain the same except for Knowles. And, if
it might,
we'll see what happens there. But you're replacing 8 guys defensively, 8 starters. Like Davison returns, Sonny returns, and Caleb Downs returns. So would it shock you if the first 2-3 weeks, maybe even month of the season, 6 games, whatever, that the defense is working out some kinks and that they got a new play caller, got a lot of new guys coming in? I don't think it should shock anybody if they're not the best defense in the country early on. I think, I don't think that's unreasonable to say that it might take a little bit for those guys.
Pressure on the quarterback to perform. And
I'm going to say, let's say that the defense does have those issues. And it's like, all right, would you rather have the defense a defense that's going to be loaded with talent, by the way? I want to be clear about that. A defense that's going to be loaded with 4-star, 5-star players who have just, probably would have been starters in the 2024 season had a couple of guys made their decisions, right? Like, you think Jack, JT, Tyleek, all 3 of those guys very well could have been gone Denzel Burke could have been gone. You think about that, like there's guys that are ready that could, step into a role, and they're veteran players. They're just, some of them are a little inexperienced. Would you rather have some kinks to work out on defense or some kinks to work out at quarterback? I think you'd rather start at quarterback where your coach's expertise is.
Yeah.
With a new play caller, with a new offensive line coach, making sure that transition goes seamlessly, right? Because I bet you that there's going to be a little bit of collaboration, on the part of Hartline and Bowen, where they're putting together game plans where he's relying maybe a little bit on Bowen on run game schemes and on run game things like that. That makes sense, right? That can happen. So yeah, you want Day working with the quarterbacks, making sure those things go smoothly, making sure that they're working, cohesively, and making sure that everything is flowing in the right manner. That's totally fair, because you'd rather be focusing on that than have to worry about the defense. And then if you have to pivot to the defense after a month, then you can do that. That's the free reign that a CEO level head coach has, and that's the benefit of having this type of head coach when you have the staff that you do right now.
So Tyler Bowen, what do we think?
I think it's a good hire. I mean, you just went and got an ACC offensive coordinator to come be your O-line coach and maybe get like a co-OC title, maybe a run game coordinator title, but you just went and took a 3-year.
Why are you just like diminishing that? He said, a little run game coordinator.
I'm just saying, because we don't know for sure. We don't know for sure, but like on the surface, it looks like he's gonna get those titles.
I would expect he's going to be the run game coordinator, and him and Carlos Locklyn are going to be in lockstep, no pun intended, on helping design this run game, because Brian Hartline and Ryan Day, great offensive minds. That's for putting the ball in the air.
But the point is, though, all of those titles, no matter how many of them you put on him, are not as prominent as offensive coordinator.
No, that's true.
So he is, however you want to describe it, in terms of the job, he's taken a step back to come to Ohio State. Yeah. That makes it, on the surface right away, that makes it look like a home run hire to me. And his recruiting history is pretty well. He's got experience even for someone who's younger. I think it's a pretty good hire. And a name that kind of didn't really come up a ton until like right before he was hired.
I think because Day lost both of his coordinators, the offensive line coach wasn't really as much of a hot topic out in the media sphere as it should have been. And maybe because, I don't know, maybe we wanted to see what the offensive coordinator would be first. Because, right, if your offensive coordinator is Kevin Wilson, well, he's also probably going to be your offensive line coach. Right. So now that the Tyler Bowen hire essentially said Brian Hartline is going to be my offensive coordinator. So, Andrew, this becomes I think it's a recruiting question, because I don't think we're worried about Ohio State's ability to develop offensive linemen. They just won a national title with their 7th, 8th, and 9th offensive linemen starting. And one of them was playing two sides of the offensive line at the same time. And I don't have questions about development of offensive line. In fact, the NFL doesn't either. That's why Justin Fry's in the NFL right now. But I do have questions about their ability to get high-end talent to develop. And I do wonder if Tyler Bowen's resume suggests that if you give him the resources at Ohio State and you put the logo on his chest on a polo, maybe there's some guys that Ohio State wasn't getting that they might be able to get now.
Not to be negative Nelly here. I have questions about Ohio State's ability to develop offensive linemen, and that's because the coach left. Like, I would like to see it with the new guy, right? I would like to see it with Tyler Bowen. I mean,
he's got players in the NFL right now.
Of course. It's just Justin Fry might have we'll see if Justin Fry was better at it, because Justin Fry is coaching an NFL offensive line right now. And I watched Justin Fry put together an offensive line that looked to be dead in the water after you lose McLaughlin. Like, I know everything revolves around that Michigan loss, but they shouldn't have called the plays that they called, but the interior offensive line was not good in that game, right? You might beat them if the interior line blocks better, and they didn't play well either. So
you don't even believe that.
What?
You don't believe that game plan would have won if they would have blocked better. Mason Graham and Kenneth
Yeah,
Grant
I mean,
still exist.
maybe look, block them up. If they played like they did in the college football playoff on the offensive line, they might have won that game. But that's not the point. The point I'm making is Landon Tengwall, who was one of the higher rated recruits that that Bowen has had. He does some really interesting like film stuff. He's a retired offensive lineman for Penn State. It was actually like really informative. I was watching some of his stuff throughout the playoff, especially like when they got to the Boise State game and the Notre Dame game. I thought his breakdowns were actually really, really smart. They were really, really good to look at. He tweeted today, Tyler Bowen was the best recruiter I've seen. I was no doubt committing to Penn State once he left Maryland to go to PSU. He's going to go toe-to-toe with Trout Wayne with those O-line recruiting battles. That obviously being offensive line coach for Penn State. That's just one guy's opinion, and obviously he got recruited by him, so obviously he's going to have a high opinion of him, right? If you commit to somebody, you're not committing to someone and going, I think this guy sucks. I think this guy's not very smart. So I think that this is big. You need to recruit better at Ohio State. That's undeniable. Yeah, Justin Fry did a great job with this offensive line, but they also signed 3 offensive linemen in the 2025 class. You cannot do that every year because we talked about this, Stephen, where you can go portaling, but one of these times you're gonna miss, and it's gonna hurt you, and then all of a sudden you're gonna turn around and go, we don't have this in-house development that we thought we were going to. And you can't be in that situation. So in-house development, especially on the offensive line, is really where you want to build things. And I think, yeah, this can absolutely take a step forward. We've mentioned how big this 2026 class is in the state of Ohio. Maxwell Riley is going to have a decision to make. It sounds like in a couple of weeks, he's deciding between Ohio State and Clemson. He's a kid out of Avon. All right, well, then you go to Adam Guthrie. He's got another decision to make, another really talented tackle. Sam Greer, 4-star tackle out of Archbishop Hoban in Akron. We'll see where he ends up. Those are kids in state that you got to hit on and that you got to find. And I think I mentioned this in our video. The thing that's interesting to me is that Bowen has a relationship in the DC area, right? In Northern Virginia and Maryland and in DC. And I'm curious, is that pipeline going to open up some doors maybe? Because yeah, Ohio State has always had, the Ohio pipeline, right? You always talk about Ohio kids. It's like, okay, well, if you can extend that out a little bit with Bowen, that might open up a whole new class of kid for you. And this is an interesting scenario because it's not Penn State. And we talk about Penn State as if they're like the little brother, but they kind of are. Like, it's not Penn State. It's not Maryland. You now are at Ohio State, and there is nothing that is a ceiling to you at Ohio State. There is no cap on what you can do at Ohio State. You can go get 3 5-star offensive linemen if you wanted to. If you have the funds and you have the ability, you can go pull them because you're at Ohio State. So I'm curious how his recruiting philosophy changes. I'm curious what changes there, but I think the makings are set up for him to say, you know what, we've got pipelines that we can count on in Ohio and the DC area. We've got, a run game that I think you probably believe in. I think with him, the makings are there. You're basically looking at the counter going, okay, we got all of our, we're making a gumbo and we've got the meat, we've got the veggies, we got the spices, we got everything here. We just got to put it together. And I think if you put it together, I think it could be really, really good.
Fun fact. Do you know who his offensive coordinator was when he was playing at Maryland?
James Franklin.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, being from the DC area, like I'm gonna hype up that stuff with Bowen. Being from the DC area, there is a very, very fun alternate history where James Franklin, they keep him as the coach in waiting at Maryland instead of letting him go to Vanderbilt, and Ralph Friedgen retires and Randy Edsall and that whole thing. So yeah, love that alternate history. But
if James Franklin has the exact same career at
Maryland, who?
I mean, 10-2 Maryland would be fun.
For who?
It would be fun. It would be fun in the sense of like 11-1 Indiana was fun, but once it happens 10 years in a row and nothing gets accomplished, it gets boring.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, why not?
But I don't know. I think if James Franklin had the exact career he's had at Penn State, at Maryland, we wouldn't be as down on him.
We would be talking about him. No, first off, if he had that exact same career, we'd be going, man,
he'd be at Florida
when's he going to get a big boy job? When's he going to get a blue blood job?
It's just funny how being at a program that's supposed to be a top tier program just changes the lens of which we view a guy. It's like Ryan Day before winning a ring. He's got one of the best winning percentages of all time, but should he be fired?
I use this example all the time. You win 9 games at Ohio State, they will put for sale signs in your front yard. You win 9 games at Virginia, they will throw you a parade.
Yeah, literally. And right after the 9th win, it doesn't matter if there's 3 more games after that or not. Right after the win, they're going to give you a parade.
They come bowl eligibility, and they're like, we did it, guys. We're going to the military bowl.
You know what I learned when, what I was reminded of when I was researching Tyler Bowen? I wrote an article in December with Urban Meyer putting out a statement that he's not returning to be Ohio State's head coach. Urban Meyer put out a statement 2 months ago saying that he will not come back to be Ohio State's head coach.
And then Ryan Day said, "You dang right you're not."
Yeah, it's like, I'm not even going to give me the option.
Yeah, I'm going to go win a ring. Here's what I want from Tyler Bowen on the recruiting trail. I want another Landon Tangwall, and I want an Olu Fashanu. That's not unreasonable. It's Ohio State. And what I mean by that is Landon Tangwall was a top 60 recruit in the area for which Penn State should be killing it on the recruiting trail. Penn State should be killing it in the DMV. And they were killing it in the DMV with this guy's offensive line coach. Rasheed Walker, also from the DMV area, he got him. Top 70 recruit. That's an area where Penn State was killing it, and Tyler Bowen was killing it. So you just brought up all those Ohio kids. That's what I mean. That he needs to be killing it in Ohio. Those kids all need to be Buckeyes. No, as long as it's not about money. If recruitments come down to money with the offensive line, I get it. Because it's not about Ohio State not being able to do it. Their philosophy is very clear at this point, and David Sanders is probably a prime example. They're not paying a bunch of money for a kid who maybe won't play for you for 2 years. Maybe. Jeremiah Smith is different. So there is no cap on how far they were willing to go to make sure he signed. Everybody ain't Jeremiah Smith. Everybody ain't getting Jeremiah Smith money before they've done anything on a football field. So I get it, especially with the offensive line. Andrew says this all the time. It is a developmental position by nature. So why would we give you upfront money when we have no idea what you're about to turn into in the next 2 years? So if it comes down to money, that's why Ohio State's not getting an offensive lineman because they say we're out, fine. I'm with you. Anything other than that, your backyard needs to have a stone wall around it because Tyler Bowen. I keep saying Tyler Warren because he also was responsible for Tyler Warren.
I was going to say, he's also doing that. And it was,
Yeah. So he can do this across multiple positions. But Tyler Bowen can lock things down. And he needs to lock things down in 2026. I say Olu Fashanu because Olu Fashanu was a number 401 player in the 2020 recruiting class. And he turned in to a first-round draft pick. So what I am essentially saying is, go get me some dudes, but also show me you can evaluate. Go find DeJuan Jones. Go find a Josh Simmons. Go find what we think Ethan Owenyawa might be able to do this year. Hand in hand. Go find me a Josh Fryer. Josh Fryer was pretty quality the last 2 years. Is he a first-round draft pick? No, but he's pretty quality. Go find both, because that's what the offensive line is. It's a bit of, here's a talented guy who we think in year 2 can compete for a job, and here is a guy who lower rated. There's some context behind why he's lower rated, but there's something in there that if it hits, it's a first-round draft pick. Go get me both of those guys.
And if we want to talk about the developmental stuff, he's going to be tested right away, right? Like, Justin probably found him, Ethan Owenyawa, but you got to make it into something.
Yep.
You got to turn that into something. Philip Daniels, I know he's
it's the gumbo. It's the gumbo example. They're sitting on the table for you. Make the gumbo.
Sure, make the gumbo.
Make the gumbo and make it a good gumbo.
Okay, can we? Okay, by the way, we're gonna trademark that
I want
phrase
some
for
gumbo.
for Bowen in 2025. Anytime we talk about the offensive line, I'm gonna mark this down right now. This is Mark It Down Wednesday. I'm gonna say make the gumbo. Whenever we need the offensive line to do anything, I'm just gonna say make the gumbo.
He's gonna look at us like, "What do you?" Anyway, okay.
If Mary Kay is listening to this podcast, our wonderful Browns writer, she's in New Orleans for the Super Bowl. Go get yourself some gumbo.
Go get yourself some and a beignet. Go get you some gumbo and a beignet and have you a good time. Let's take a quick break, and then I have a question I want to pose to Stefan and Andrew to kind of wrap this up here about Ohio State's offensive coaching staff, and really something that I think Ryan Day is on the verge of doing, and I can't wait to ask him about it whenever we talk with him. But first, here's our sponsors on Buckeye Talk.
This episode is brought to you by MeUndies. Underwear drawers are like the Wild West. You never know what you're going to pull out or what shape it's in. So upgrade your collection with the buttery soft comfort of MeUndies. MeUndies' signature fabric is as soft as a warm hug from your favorite sweater. Plus, it's breathable and oh so comfy, making it ideal for all-day wear. Get 20% off your first order, plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/Spotify with code SPOTIFY. That's MeUndies.com/Spotify, code SPOTIFY.
Did you know a 2018 study showed half of prenatal vitamins tested had unacceptable levels of heavy metals? I'm Kat, mother of 3 and founder of Ritual. When I was 4 months pregnant, I couldn't find a prenatal I could trust, so I created my own. Ours is made traceable, third-party tested for heavy metals, and recently earned the Purity Award from the Clean Label Project. But don't just take my word for it. Get 25% off at ritual.com/podcast.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. I call them our sponsors. I don't know. They're ads, okay? They're things. They pay bills.
New.
Okay?
That was new.
Yeah, they're paying the bills, man. We got to pay the bill. We got to keep the lights on around here, okay?
I promise it's still Steven that you're listening to. That was not a new person taking us into commercial.
Yeah, they didn't let me go because I called something it wasn't. Stefan, Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis were talking Ohio State's 3 new offensive coaching staff hires. Billy Fessler as the quarterback's coach. Brian Hartline promoted to play calling offensive coordinator, not just the OC. He's still going to be the wide receiver coach, but I do think Devin Jordan, who's in that room, as well as his number 1 GA, is probably going to have a more prominent role going forward, especially since you can have unlimited coaches coaching on the field. He becomes a little bit more important. Keenan Bailey, who's the tight ends coach, but I'm sure he'll also be involved with some wide receiver stuff as well. And then Tyler Bowen, they bring in from Virginia Tech to be the offensive line coach. I sent this to our texters. I had Keenan Bailey's age wrong, so I apologize, Keenan, for aging you. At least I think it's wrong. 247 Sports has him at 29. I thought he was 33. So Billy Fessler is 29. Keenan Bailey is 29. Brian Hartline is 38. Tyler Bowen is 35. Carlos Locklyn is 47. So he's the only guy in the room older than 40. That's an average of 35.6 as an age. That's a very young staff. That's a very, very, very young staff. Even if you add in the defense, the only other assistant coaches on this staff right now, we're recording this and there is not a defensive coordinator yet, who are over the age of 40 are Tim Walton and Larry Johnson. Larry Johnson's 70 and Tim Walton was born in 1971. It's 53.
53, yeah.
Yeah, so let's add him in there. 53 plus 70. How old is Matt Guerrieri? Matt Guerrieri is 35. And I think James Laurinaitis is like 38 years old. If I have that correctly. Yeah, he's 38. So it's 5 on offense. Walton, Larry Johnson, Guerrieri. That's 9 right now. And they're looking for the 10th. That's an average age of 41.5. And that's because Larry Johnson really hikes it up there because he's 70 years old. That is a super young coaching staff. How young is it? The average age of the coaching staff is younger than the head coach. 4 years younger than the head coach. So this is either going to make Ryan Day look like a genius, or I think it might backfire, Stefan. And I think, and I hinted at this in the first part, this is what happens when you run a ring. It gets you some leeway that I don't think Ryan Day had last year to go make Brian Hartline his offensive coordinator, to promote from within for his quarterbacks coach, knowing the last time he did it, it was hit or miss with Corey Dennis, depending on how you want to look at some things here. Having this young of a coaching staff is a result of a dude who just won a championship, and now he can start flexing his muscles a little bit and really start building his own coaching tree because he doesn't have one yet. And someone from this group is eventually going to leave Ohio State, thus beginning the Ryan Day coaching tree.
I try to avoid hyperbole and being overly dramatic with this stuff, but it does feel like this could be the offseason that determines whether Ryan Day is the latest Ohio State coach to win a ring but not win any more, or if he becomes a coach that starts putting together 2, 3, 4 national titles. And the reason I say maybe that's overly dramatic is because if in 2 years these hires aren't working, maybe he does just go back the route of, okay, find some older guys, find some established guys, find that year's Chip Kelly or however you want to categorize it. So like he's got himself the leeway where he can work out of this if these promotions and these hires don't necessarily pan out. But man, if they do, then think about not just the success that they can have with Hartline and Fessler and Bowen and Guerreri and guys like that on staff. Think about what's going to happen after that. I mean, at some point, if Hartline's as successful as an offensive play caller as we think he can be, I mean, he's going to get hired as a head coach. And guess what? There's going to be a million offensive coordinators who are lining up to come work for Ryan Day. Billy Fessler might be a great QB coach in a few years. He's offered a job as an offensive coordinator somewhere at the Power 4 level. Guess what? There's going to be a lot of young guys lining up to be his quarterbacks coach. You know who's went through this? Chip Kelly, when Billy Fessler left Akron to go be his quarterbacks coach at UCLA and then left to be his analyst at Ohio State because that's how badly he wanted to be with Chip Kelly. So this is an opportunity and kind of a fork in the road for Ryan Day of which way things are going to go. Because there's no denying that what if Hartline and Fessler and Bowen and whatever else happens at defense coordinator, what if it doesn't work out? Well, then Ryan Day's going to have a tough decision to make. And the ring kind of bought him that leeway of if in 2 years they're still struggling and still kind of rebuilding, Ryan Day doesn't have a ring to say, okay, keep me around. Let me fix it again. He kind of has that leeway now. So getting a ring goes a long way. It helps you out a ton. I'm sure a win against Michigan in the next year or two would probably help as well. But like a lot of things are in place now where Ryan Day can take chances like this and kind of go big or go home because, well, there's no going home. It's just go big or go big again and try again. So he's put himself in a spot where the opportunities are kind of endless for him now. And if this goes right, then that just extends. That just extends how big his coaching tree can get. Like Ryan Day is now at a part where, boom, you've reached the highest level in terms of being a coach that can win a national championship. There's only 2 other active head coaches who could say that. Can you take it to that next level? Can you be a coach that's got a statue? Can you get to that level? That's where hires like this kind of end up determining that.
Well, and, just thinking about this, like, there's a quote from Ted Lasso that I really like. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that show. For anybody listening to this, it's a good mentor hopes you move on. A great mentor knows you will. You hire some of these young guys kind of with the understanding of, all right, Fessler might not be long for this world at Ohio State, but we're betting on him. And we're betting on him to be really good for us for however long he's here. Because like you think about it, like we talk about him and his Penn State background. What if Kotelnicki gets a head coaching job next cycle, right? If the Penn State offensive coordinator job is open, it's like, okay, man, does that just make sense for him? And there's nothing you could do about that, right? Like he's getting a promotion, he's going back to his alma mater. I just use that as an example to say like, there are certain things where you're like, you know what? You're going to lose guys, especially if you hire younger guys, because it's not like you're hiring, a staff full of, okay, we have a 66-year-old offensive coordinator who's content with being a coordinator, doesn't want to deal with anything else. You've got, position coaches who, they're good with where they're at in their career. They're not really looking to bounce around and take a job every year. It's like, when you hire these young guys, it's, you're betting on a situation where it's almost safer or excuse me, when it's almost safer to hire the the more experienced guys. But the ceiling, I think, is exactly what Ohio State should be after right now, because you can maybe withstand the risk. You just won a national championship. You've got a head coach, like we've said, who's feeling as good as he's felt in his entire Ohio State tenure. You feel probably as good about the health of the program as you've ever felt in terms of where it's at on the field, where it's at on the coaching staff, where it's at in NIL, where it's at with really everything. You feel really, really strongly about it. So why play it safe? Go for the guy you think is going to be a head coach in a few years. Go like if you think Billy Fessler is, what'd you say was the word that Ennis used, Stephen? Mastermind or whatever word that was? Like, yeah, go get him and then deal with the rest later, because right now is the perfect time to do that.
I'm just wondering if this can be his thing as a head coach. You know what I mean? I think we're bringing up Nick Saban's name too much sometimes, because I think
he's the greatest coach in the sports history. Yeah,
I know. Yeah, right. We're not bringing it up because we're saying that Ryan Day is going to win 7 national titles. We're bringing it up because there's a hole and there's a void that needs to be filled by somebody, and it seems like everybody's fighting to fill it, and we're not sure who's going to do it. Right? You thought Kirby Smart was going to be that, and it can still be Kirby Smart. They just took a step back this year, and we're not really sure what their team is going to look like next year. Maybe Lincoln Riley at USC, right? Oh man, Lincoln Riley, the quarterback, the offensive mind he is. Now he's at a blue blood program that's been dormant for a while. Can he bring them back to life? No. There's the answer to that question. Dabo's best years seem to be behind him right now, though I wonder if the 12-team college football playoff can revive Clemson a little bit, along with the fact that K. Klubnik is probably the best quarterback in college football entering next season. Dan Lanning is out at Oregon clearly building something. And he's got a mountain to climb, and that's winning some consequential games. This means winning a playoff game next year, right? But nobody's overall opinion of Dan Lanning changed after this year. Nobody went, maybe he's not going to be. No, he's still building. This is year 3 for him. He's heading into year 4. We still think he's headed on that trajectory. That's the list. Steve Sarkisian, at Texas, building. Texas is back. You get to the Final Four 2 years in a row, you're back. Now can you keep it up with Quinn Ewers gone, and can you build something with Arch Manning? Can Sharon Moore, was last year just a rebuilding year for Michigan? And now they're right back in it, which I think rebuilding years in college football are a lot more reasonable things to expect going forward in this 12-team college football playoff world where there's NIL, so the talent's getting a little bit more spread out. And I keep hinting at that. I really want to get into that with you guys maybe in like May. The idea of the rebuilding year in college football not being as crazy as we thought it was. Can Billy Napier get something popping with DJ Lagway? Can Nebraska with, and Stefan made a face. I'm with you. I'm just listing coaches, man. Can
no, you're right. I mean, you're
but
right.
it's just, there's just options. You're just looking for people who have a situation where maybe they can fill the void if some things go the right way. And because Ryan Day's sitting on top of the mountain right now as the national champion, he's getting most of that attention because the conversation with him is now, you got your first one. You need to go solve Michigan, but you got your first one. Now what? What's next? Saban's thing, especially later in the Alabama years, turned into he was really rehabilitating head coaches. He was bringing them in as analysts, turning them into coordinators, giving them rings, and then sending them out the door to go run a program. And then within the midst of all that, he also had Kirby Smart as a DC. He also had Dan Lanning as a position coach at one time, right? He also had a bunch of these dudes who were G-Gays. Lane Kiffin was an OC. Steve Sarkisian was an OC. Mel Tucker, I believe, was over there at Alabama at one point. Maryland's had Locksley was an assistant coach at Alabama. So it was a mixture of both. He was rehabilitating head coaches, but he was also sending head coaches out into the world after developing them in their own program. So if this is stage 1 of that for Ryan Day, Hartline's been around for a while. So Hartline Hartline is going to be Ryan Day to his Chip Kelly, the way this is setting itself up. Not as deep because obviously Ryan Day and Chip Kelly have known each other since they were kids. But you get what I'm saying. But if this staff is ground zero for where Ryan Day's coaching tree started to sprout roots, and it's 10 years from now, Billy Fessler's a head coach somewhere. Brian Hartline's a head coach somewhere. Tyler Bowen's a head coach somewhere. Keenan Bailey, I think, is well on his way to being a head coach somewhere at some point. On the defensive side, Matt Guerreri's a head coach somewhere someday. James Laurinaitis is a head coach someday. There's some GAs who are in the building right now. Riley Larkin is up in the NFL right now, right? Alan Clark right now is the outside linebackers coach at Texas. Like this year, this ring is where that started. Okay. I could buy that. I just know the other end of that spectrum is he went too young in 2025. It backfired, and so he ends up overcorrecting next year and going too old. Because right now he doesn't have a balance of old guy, young guy. He's just got a bunch of young guys who we think have high potential even if they haven't tapped into it yet.
Well, let me say one thing, and then let me ask you a question. The first thing I want to say, we're recording February 5th, 2025. Buckeye Talk being the first to predict that one day Ryan Day is going to say, all right, I'm sick of being a head coach. He's going to be Brian Hartline's offensive coordinator. We got that first. Calling dibs. Calling dibs on that. The second thing I want to ask you, all of this, the way it's panning out, we've talked about Matt Guerreri potentially being the next defense coordinator, the way Ryan Day talks about him. I think he would be the most likely guy on that staff to be the play caller, but it all makes sense for 53-year-old Tim Walton to be a co-DC, right?
Yep.
That makes a lot more sense now.
Old guy, young guy on the side of the ball where the head coach is not an expert. He doesn't have to do old guy, young guy on his side of the ball because instead what he's done is create an environment where Brian Hartline has enough people he can be sounding boards off of while also Ryan Day is right there for him as well.
And you can give Matt Guerreri the reins and say, hey, you call the plays, but he's got Tim Walton to lean on. He's got Larry Johnson to lean on. Guys who have been around who know it probably a little bit better than he does right now.
So, and the other thing that I was thinking about as well, was the 2024 Ohio State team not just the biggest lesson in the world of a team that can grow into something? Is the coaching staff not just that, where you're saying this coaching staff might grow into a role that is significantly better in November and in December than it is on August 30th or whatever day that Texas game is? Like I said, I think I forget if I said this on a pod or on a video or whatever. I don't know if anybody's expecting, or maybe it was on this pod, I don't know if anybody's expecting Brian Hartline to be the best play caller in the country the first play of his offensive coordinator team.
Depends who he throws it to.
That's fair. I don't think anybody.
I don't. You're not expecting it, but I don't know if it would.
It wouldn't shock me, but it wouldn't shock me. But I guess my point is you are asked. You might have a first time play caller on offense and defense. You might have a bunch of new.
Matt Guerreri's called plays before.
Right. Well, we'll see if it's Guerreri. That's my point. So it's you might have that. You could also have a guy who's stepping into a new role. You could have a lot of new, but I think we learned with 2024 Ohio State, you can get better and you can improve and you can turn it on late. The coaches were so proud of the fact that, hey, we built for this, right? Think about what Chip Kelly said about the running backs, and then not just the running backs, but the rest of the offense. Hey, we purposely slowed down so that we would be ready to go later in the season. I think when you hire these young guys, or you're hiring guys for roles that they have not had before, I think it's natural to say they can get better. Just like a left guard can get better, just like an outside linebacker can get better. They can get better as they progress through their coaching careers. Billy Fessler can be a far better coach in October than he was in July.
Yeah.
And he can be a better coach in December than he was in September. And I think that's part of this as well, that it's not just, hey, the team's got to improve. It's, you know what? Some of these young coaches, as they progress through games and as they get more comfortable into their roles, which some of them might have for the first time, they can improve and they can get better too.
Well, success is always going to be a driving factor of how we think of coaches and how they're remembered. And
Of course.
But the point being, this is the first football team in college football history that's had the chance to kind of prove itself in this way, to get better as the season goes on. Like, yeah, sure, Saban's Alabama teams, they got better as the season went on, but they had to learn from wins. That was their only option.
Right.
Until the playoff came around, right? Like, this is the first team in history that's been able to lose and learn from it. And yeah, you got to learn a lot about these coaches as well. Like, if Ohio State went 10-2 and they don't make the playoff, before this year, are we sitting here saying Justin Fry deserves to be in the NFL? Like, let's be honest.
We might not be talking about Ryan Day if it was a 2-team playoff or a 4-team playoff.
I think I would be saying Justin Fry needs to go to the NFL, but it wouldn't be in the positive tone.
Right.
And that's the point you're making. Notre Dame, too. That's what I loved about this national championship. It was two teams who just had very bad moments.
They were defined by their losses for a lot of the year, it felt like. It felt like so many people were talking about Ohio State and the Michigan loss and Notre Dame and Northern Illinois.
And that's just, I thought in two different ways they learned from it. Ohio State learned, we overthought that. How about we not overthink it this time around? And it led to some real man-to-man conversations. The documentary is going to be cool one day when that stuff starts coming out publicly and not just to media members who aren't allowed to say anything. That's not Marcus Freeman's first bad loss, Andrew, at Notre Dame. But they had to learn how to win and not have the hangover. Because that was Marcus Freeman had the best win and the worst loss of his career within 14 days. So it was learning how to, okay, we're coming off a pretty hyperbolic game. Let's reset it, right? Because that's what they didn't do in Freeman's first year in 2022. Yeah. Hyperbolic game where it was a win-win for them. You were either going to win that game, and it's like, okay, the Marcus Freeman era is here, or you were going to play a competitive game against a national championship contender, and people were going to go, okay, Marcus Freeman is building something. The problem is you lost at home to Marshall the next week.
Yeah.
So you didn't build off of what should have been a moment of your arrival, win or lose. The following year, you lose to Ohio State in a fashion where you maybe should have won that game, but I don't know if people were down on Marcus Freeman after, again, losing to a team that many thought should have won a national title.
They had 10 guys on the field for the last two plays of the game.
But that's a football thing. That's not about bigger picture of whether this is the guy or not. That's just about, hey, you had a stupid moment in the game. Then you get a pretty decent win over Duke, at Duke the following week on primetime television. And then you lose to Louisville. So it's like, all right, well, like you're not really building any momentum towards anything here. Those are the first two years of Marcus Freeman. And then obviously the Northern Illinois loss didn't help with that. So for them, their concurrent demons was, we beat Indiana. Okay, we got a first one. Well, earlier in the season, Notre Dame loses their next playoff game. Based off of proof in the pudding, they were going to win one playoff game and then not win anymore. Instead, they beat Georgia, they beat Penn State, and they beat Ohio, and then they were competitive with Ohio State. Even if Ohio State got out to an early lead, the way they did the entire playoff for Ohio State, it was big game Ryan Day. Can he do it or not? Well, he won 4 straight big games. So in a way, I loved this national championship because of what it did for both of these programs. But we cover Ohio State, so that's all I care about.
Yeah, but both those teams, one team had to learn how to handle success, and the other team had to learn how to handle failure.
Yes.
And I think that was really interesting.
Listen, man, I can't wait for you guys to hear this Friday pod, man. It's just
sometimes Gillis just nails it.
It's just on it, man. It's just
wait. If you're confused why on the Friday pod I point out Gillis wearing a Virginia Tech shirt, it's because we were about to get the Tyler Bowen hired.
Yeah, we sat down and I was just hadn't left the apartment all day, and I was like, all right, let me just throw on a T-shirt I have here, and oops.
Great shirt. It says
it's a great shirt. It says exit light, and on the back it says enter night. It's a great shirt.
I just think Ryan Day is in a situation now where he can start thinking about some things that you can't think about when you don't know what's next. It does fail now or never. And you said, was 2014 the ultimate learning year? I think from a staff construction standpoint, Ryan Day had to be 100% sure about everything. There couldn't leave no doubt. That was the theme. And it applied to every single piece of this program, both and I asked Ryan Day that before the national championship, before we went down to Atlanta, about this idea of, you kept talking about it in this micro sense of, we can't leave any doubt on the field. We got to go win games. Don't leave it down to a play. Well, can that be a macro conversation? He's like, before I'm even done with the question, absolutely. Absolutely, it can be. Because it applies to how people viewed him, how people viewed that era of Ohio State football players, how people viewed this program and where it's been, where it is right now, and where it's headed. But I also think it applied to the decisions Ryan Day was doing. You're right. Brian Day did not want to give up play calling last year. He said it in a press conference, not in a one-on-one. Do I want to? No.
He said it as recently as he said it right around the championship game too.
Right. But I don't have a choice. This is what college football is. I can't be in an offensive meeting running things on a Wednesday night when there's NIL and all this other stuff. I can't. I don't have time. I don't have the mental capacity to do all that. And so he gave it up. But if he's going to give it up, he's got to give it up to somebody where he doesn't have any questions. It can't be, I think he's going to be good. You have to know. Was Chip Kelly perfect? Of course he wasn't. No play call is perfect. But I don't think any of us ever questioned his ability to do it. We just questioned some of his decision-making at times. But that's everybody. You had to be sure about your defensive coordinator, which is why Jim Knowles leaving is annoying for fans because of where he ended up, but I don't think it's annoying that he left. Because this is what's supposed to happen. If you really pay attention, it was really conservative, some of the stuff Ryan Day did last year. He went and got a veteran quarterback. Sure thing in terms of floor. Ceiling, he met his ceiling. But we knew the floor. Because you got to be sure about everything. Because we have to make sure that this team wins a natty. Because leave no doubt, if they don't win a national championship, if they didn't do the other two things they wanted to do, but think about how much doubt we'd have about this program if they didn't win a national championship this year. And Ryan Day couldn't afford to live in that world. So last year's staff was, I need to make sure that the floor is high everywhere, like extremely high. This year, ceiling. Let's go hire some guys who I think got a really, really high ceiling and might be something special. Even if it comes in a year where I have a lot of uncertainty about my two deep right now. We know there's talent, even if it's young. And let me flex a little bit. Let me go get these young guys and figure it out and have us figure out whether they're a good coach here instead of figuring out that they're a good coach and they're doing it for somebody else. So I'm just wondering if that's how Ryan Day is thinking, and I think that's what I'm going to be asking him about next time we talk to him. That idea of this is a super young staff on both sides of the ball right now. There is not an official defensive coordinator. There is at least – now these hires aren't official either, but at least it's unofficial. The defensive coordinator situation is still up in the air right now. And it's real young and real high ceiling. Maybe the floor is high too, but we're not totally sure yet because it's guys doing something they've never done before. And is it the beginning of the Ryan Day coaching tree? Or in 2 years, are we going to look back on this and go, hey, Ryan, why did you hire a 29-year-old to be your quarterback's coach? Why is there a 35-year-old offensive line coach? Why did you give Brian Hartline the keys to your offense? You think that was a good move? But it's what you can do when you win a national title. You get benefit of the doubt, which he didn't have 12 months ago. He didn't have it 60 days ago.
They could and that's the thing. It's like with this staff, I said like you can grow into it. Like these guys can grow into a role. Think about where
they can't grow last year.
What's up?
That's I agree with you. They can grow. There was no growing last year. Chip Kelly can't learn how to be an offensive coordinator.
What they are is very good, but yeah.
But I'm saying Chip Kelly couldn't learn how to be an offensive coordinator last year. They couldn't afford their offensive coordinator to be growing on the job.
Yeah, and wait for like I guarantee you, Brian Hartline, if you were to ask him on the record, off the record, it doesn't matter. I think if you were to ask him in April, and I think if you were to ask him in November, what did you learn about being an offensive coordinator? I guarantee you, he's going to have some different answers.
Yeah,
but like think about this. Trevion Henderson pulls a Will Howard and slips and falls on that long touchdown run against Texas, and Ohio State loses in the Cotton Bowl. One, my question would be, does Ohio State have this coaching staff as it's currently constructed? Like, let's pretend Knowles leaves and Kelly leaves and Fry leaves. Does Ryan Day feel confident enough to go hire some of these young guys like we're talking about? And number two, let's say he does. Like, think about where this program would be about, maybe the pressure of, hey, you won 2 games against good teams, and then what happened? You lost, and you didn't even get to the national championship game, and blah, blah, blah. Think about, like, the pressure that would be on this team in the Texas game. It's the first game of the year, but it's like, man, you really can't start off on the bad foot there, and, like, 0-1, and, when was the last time Ohio State started 0-1? Was that – I don't remember the last time. I don't remember the last time they started 0-1. So it's like, that's actually a good stat for me to look up. But it's like, you think about where this program would be. Like, if they lose to Texas now, it's like, you know what? They got beat by a good team. They'll get better. Whereas if you don't win a national championship, it's like, why'd they hire this guy? Why'd they hire that guy? You just, like you said, Stephen, you lose the benefit of the doubt. And I think you do eliminate some of that pressure. So I'm curious, what do you guys think about that? If they lose to Texas, or if they lose one of those games, does this coaching staff, as it stands now, is this what we're talking about still?
Maybe. I mean, you look at it on the surface, you'd say there's pressure on Ryan Day. He's got to go out, and if he has to replace Chip Kelly, he's still got to find someone who's not necessarily learning on the job. But, I mean, who's hitching their wagon to that? I mean, Ryan Day's on the hottest of seats with, 20 starters leaving. You can't just say, oh, he'll go out and he'll hire Lane Kiffin to come be his offensive coordinator. Why would Lane come attach himself to that? Like, that's obviously a crazy example, but if you want someone established, it's going to be really hard to get them if you're on the hot seat. So I think maybe it would have been Hartline anyways, and the pressure still would have been on, but I don't know if it would have changed that much.
And the pressure's on guys who are stepping into a role for the first time. Like,
right.
There's an immense amount of pressure on first-time offensive coordinator Brian Hartline, or first-time play caller Brian Hartline. Yeah,
I mean, but also if they don't win, who knows? Maybe Chip comes back. Maybe he's not. $6 million is hard to turn down, and working for Pete Carroll is probably pretty hard to turn down. By the way, Chip Kelly did his introductory press conference on Wednesday, and he was talking about how he didn't want to be a head coach anymore, how he wanted to be a coordinator. And he was talking about not wanting to deal with the transfer portal and NLI, and I was like, yeah, it's probably time to get out of college.
Those dang national letters of intent really killing him.
He said, yeah, so I went to go coach with my mentee, where he said, just worry about calling plays. And I said, thank you, Ryan. Yep. I'm not staying past one. And then Ryan said, hey, can you go see this kid out in California? And he said, sure. And as he got off his flight, he said, I'm not coming back here next year. We just had a texter say this, and I responded to them. But obviously, you either like this or you don't, especially the Hartline part. 727, this is not how Nick Saban operated at Alabama. He had the pick of the best and always went with the most experienced and capable. So should we. That's not true. For starters, Nick Saban had the same defensive coordinator the first 8 years he was Alabama's head coach. And it was a defensive coordinator who was the DB's coach the year before 2008. And he promoted him to defensive coordinator. You know who that is?
Repeat that one more time.
Nick Saban who was a defensive-minded head coach, had the same defensive coordinator the first 8 or 9 years he was Alabama's head coach, which he promoted to defensive coordinator. Do you know who that is?
It wasn't Kirby.
It was Kirby Smart.
Oh, it was Kirby. Oh, interesting.
I think Brian Hartline might be Ryan Day's Kirby Smart. Or what Brent Venables was to Dabo. Now, Brent had a career before that. Obviously, he had been Oklahoma's defense course, so that's a little different. But Kirby Smart's first time calling plays was with Nick Saban at Alabama. And Kirby stayed for almost a decade. And then he left in 2016 to go be Georgia's head coach. And now he's arguably the best coach in college football. I think that's best case scenario. I mean, Brian Hartline and Ryan Day have been together for 8 years, and 6 of those Ryan Day's been the head coach. I think that's what you have here. So I think Nick Saban's the GOAT, but when you're the GOAT, you get crystallized, and we kind of overlook some decisions because we think other people should be doing the same thing. I think Ryan Day is doing the same thing Nick Saban was doing at this point. And that's hiring young guys, developing them, sending them out into the world to be coaches somewhere else, and then continuing the cycle. So that's best case scenario is Ryan Day is starting to create head coaches. Worst case scenario, in 2 years, we're going, Ryan, what the heck were you thinking back then? Get the text, 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99. After that, Ohio State's got an offensive coaching staff. I'm sure over the next 3-4 days here, this will all be official, and that leaves a defensive coordinator for Ryan Day to go find to fill out his 2025 coaching staff on offense. Brian Hartline goes from wide receivers coach to also being the play calling offensive coordinator. Billy Fessler goes from analyst to being the quarterbacks coach. Keenan Bailey and Carlos Locklyn are still here as the tight ends coach and running backs coaches. And Tyler Bowen, he hires him away from Virginia Tech to be his offensive line coach for Stefan Krajisnik and Andrew Gillis. I'm Stephen Means. That was Buckeye Talk.